Welcome to the InitiativeOne Leadership Podcast, where we help leaders maximize their impact and transform their lives. I'm your host, Romeo Marquez Jr., as well as the Chief Growth Officer for InitiativeOne. In this episode, we take you back to one of our past think tanks where Dr. Paul Metler, InitiativeOne's Vice President of Content Development, talks about work-life balance. Now, is it possible to have work-life balance when the lines between work and life continue to blur? The answer is yes. Finding work-life balance is crucial to personal, professional, and organizational health. We're going to dive into what proper work-life balance actually looks like. So without further ado, let's hand it over to Dr. Paul Metler.
Every time we gather with leaders, we begin with what we call a check-in. It is a signature feature of all of our work with leadership. When we get together in the room, be it a virtual room or be it in person, we love to check in. And there's a very, very simple reason for that. Despite the fact that I could point to leadership research that really does lift up the value of that, I want to keep it more personal. The reason we do that is we care about you. The reason we have a leadership think tank on a monthly basis is simply because, as InitiativeOne began, in the heart of our founder, Dr. Fred Johnson, was a desire to connect in a way to communicate. We care about you. We want you to live well. We want you to lead well. And one of the ways that is very effective to do that is to check in. Today is about work-life balance, and that connects to something that we love to talk about, and that's emotional intelligence. There are a couple of authors, Hugard and Carter, who wrote a book called The Mind of a Leader. It's one of my favorite ways to describe emotional intelligence. They say this. They say, as you cultivate emotional intelligence, you develop a capacity to know moment by moment what you're thinking and how you're feeling, how you're thinking and what you're feeling. When you heard that our topic today was work-life balance, what were you thinking? How were you feeling? There's a reason you clicked and you registered. There's a reason that you are with me in this moment. You're listening right now. There's a reason. You were thinking something. You were feeling something. So jump into the chat. I'll go back to Stephanie in just a few minutes and check in to see what some of your responses are, because I'm interested in that. It's a way for us to check in with our emotional intelligence. A part of the issue with work-life balance right now is this. We're busy. We're stretched. We're stressed. I would even use the word exhausted. And when we are those things, it takes a little bit extra effort to check in to say, how am I feeling? How am I thinking? What am I thinking? What am I feeling? You know, the great author Flannery O'Connor once wrote that a story is a way to say what cannot be said adequately with just a statement. When a statement is inadequate, we need a story. And so I can make a statement to begin today that work-life balance is important to me. And that's a truthful statement. Work-life balance is important to me. Frankly, I can make a statement that work-life balance is important to you, or you wouldn't have engaged with us for this leadership think tank. On top of that, we work with many of you day in, day out, month in, month out. Some of you are relatively new to InitiativeOne, but many of you we know, and you know us. And so I can share quite candidly that we've been with you and we've been listening. We've been listening in our check-ins and our leadership transformation processes. We've been listening to you on other occasions when we've engaged with you. We've been listening, and so I can make a statement that work-life balance is important to you because I know that it is, because you've shared with us that it is. And I know that you are wrestling, as we are at InitiativeOne, what's the best way to address that? Well, I want to begin by telling you a story, because I think O'Connor had something to say about that. I do believe that sometimes the statement's inadequate. I do believe sometimes the story helps. And let me tell you a little bit of my story. So something you need to know about me, and some of you know this, I've been a type 1 diabetic for over 50 years since I was a child. Most of my life, and that includes right now today, I've been very healthy. And I count that as a blessing, and I have a lot of gratitude about that. However, there was a season in my life, a little over 25 years ago, that I wasn't. There was a season of my life where it seemed like, I would describe my health this way, it was crisis after crisis after crisis. In particular, I'll hone in on one of those crisis situations, and that had to do with my vision. Some of you may know that diabetes is the number one cause of blindness. So there was a season of my life over 25 years ago when I experienced a wave of hemorrhages in my eye, both eyes. And as a result of those hemorrhages, I lost sight. I lost sight in both eyes. Very blessed that I didn't lose sight at the same time in both eyes. But over a period of a couple of years, on multiple occasions, I was blind. During that time, I'm very grateful for my wife, Lynn. She was such a support, such an encouragement. I know what it's like to feel helpless. I know what it's like to have to be driven around, to give up my capacity to drive. I know what it's like to have to depend on someone that stands beside you through those difficult times. It was a tough time in my life. And though there were lots of things that contributed to my health and to my crisis of health, one of the things connects directly to work-life balance. There were lots of things I was doing well. Lots of things I would even say I was doing right. One of the things that I struggled with at that season of my life was how to say yes and how to say no, how to set boundaries, and frankly, how to rest, how to reduce my level of overcommitment, and how to take a step back and say, how am I making these decisions, and what is the impact of these decisions on my health? I brought up my wife. I'll also bring up my son, Nick. So they're a part of this story because as leaders, leadership is about me, but it's never just about me. My decisions are choices that I make, but those decisions always have an effect on those around me. We teach that your purpose in leadership is always going to connect with others because your decisions have an effect on those around you. And so as I was going through this crisis, my son was born. My son's 25 years old. And there was a season in my life when my son was an infant going through multiple surgeries and really difficult surgeries that my son was a newborn, an infant, and there was a season when I couldn't even bend over and pick him up because I was recovering from those surgeries. It's a tough time. It's a tough time. So when I say work-life balance is important to me, those are things that connect with a part of my life story. Those are things that emphasize. That story helps me to say what a statement is inadequate of conveying. It's important to me. It's important to me how I make decisions and how those decisions not only affect my life, but also have had an effect on the lives of those around me. So one of the things I've discovered in seasons like that is that there are lasting impressions that stay with you a while. When we are listening to you as leaders, we listen with ears that are tuned in from our own experiences. A couple of years after that season of my life, a mutual friend introduced me to Dr. Fred Johnson. I'll never forget it. In Scottsdale, Arizona, we sat down to breakfast. And that began a journey, as Stephanie mentioned earlier. That was a journey that's lasted over 2 decades. And something that I have learned from Dr. Fred is that there are principles. Sometimes we refer to some of those principles as Fredisms. They're sayings that he delivers that stick with you, and they're accessible in the moment to help us with our decision making. I learned from Dr. Fred some things at a time in my life when I needed those principles. I needed those tangibles. I needed some things that were accessible to me that helped me make decisions. So as I sit before you today, healthy, grateful, thankful. I could even take my glasses off right now and see you. I'm grateful for my vision. I go back to that moment of meeting Dr. Fred and say, thank God. Thank God I can see, but also thank God that I came to be a part of InitiativeOne, to be a part of a team of leaders that we love connecting with you, as I said earlier, because we care. We care about the things that will help you lead well and live well and be healthy. And I'm not limiting that health to physical health, although that's important. I'm also talking about emotional health. I'm talking about relational health. I'm talking about spiritual health. I'm talking about, we know that healthy leaders create healthy culture. Healthy cultures create healthy organizations. Healthy organizations contribute to healthy communities and a better world. So our vision at InitiativeOne is to help you accelerate the kind of positive change that I've described briefly in a story, because a statement's just inadequate to say work-life balance is important. So let me take a moment and pause, and I'd be curious, Stephanie, what are you seeing? Are you seeing any answers in the chat? What are we learning from people? How are you thinking? How are you feeling this morning as we talk about work-life balance?
Based on the chat, I would say that people are feeling a little unbalanced. There's a lot pulling at them. A couple of responses saying it's tricky, it's comforting to know that we need to invest in both. They're looking for calm. They are happy to know that it's appreciated that it's difficult to talk about this, difficult to manage. Permission to take care of themselves, all of that is appreciated. So I think exactly what some of us have experienced personally, our viewers are seeing the same.
So now's a good time for me to say what this is not about today. Today is not about judgment. It's not about me casting some shame. It's not about me saying, hey, I'm here today to tell you how many hours you should work or when you should turn your phone off. This is not about a time where I want you to feel worse than you did when you logged on. This is a message of hope. This is a message of encouragement. This is a way for me to walk back through some of the lessons learned and say, this is why we do what we do, and this is why we're here today. So based upon those responses, here's what I'd like to do. I'd like to walk through just a few things that I mentioned earlier in the journey that I have had, not only with Dr. Fred, but also with you, not only with InitiativeOne, but also just engaging with people in life. You're feeling what you're feeling today because it's real and it's near to your heart and it's important to you. I want to talk about some lessons learned. When I actually jotted down 5 words. So I want to challenge you today to jot these words down. I want to challenge you today to revisit these, and I'll be a little more specific as we walk through these, but here's what's come to mind when I think about work-life balance. First of all, Dr. Fred wrote a blog just recently about work-life balance, and in that blog, he used this first word that I want to give to you. It's integrity. Integrity. In fact, when Fred described work-life balance, he said, work-life balance is a place of integrity. So I hear you. When you talk about work-life balance, it's tricky, it's messy, it's hard, it's tough. We're wrestling with it. I know you're stretched. I know you're stressed. I know you're wondering. You're looking for help. There aren't easy answers to that. And that's why I'm not presenting a formula or a recipe, and I'm certainly not here to judge what you are or aren't doing. I'm here to say that there are some principles that you need to revisit and wrestle with, and the first one is integrity. Let me share something in terms of my view of integrity that has come to help me. I mentioned a little bit of health crisis, and so one of the things that we know in the past couple of years is I believe that we're more aware of our own mortality perhaps than we have been before. We're more aware of our own mortality. I think each of us have been touched with loss. We've experienced loss. We've grieved in different ways. It's been a tough time. So here's how I think about integrity. I may not get to choose when I die. I may not get to choose how I die, but I do get to choose who I am when I die. And so the way I think about that in terms of integrity is every day our lives have a trajectory. And so the way we live today, a life of integrity is a contribution to who I am. It still remains the greatest leadership question you'll ever wrestle with. It's that question of who am I? So for those of you who've engaged with us in some of our deeper dive processes, you know we spend a lot of time on that. We really do front end load our work with leaders to make sure that we have a good grasp. Who am I? How do I set that integrity trajectory? Because what we know is leaders who know who they are have greater impact and influence. We know that leaders that have their feet firmly planted, there may be a lot of chaos around. Oh, certainly we have a lot of ambiguity, uncertainty, and challenges, complexity right now. And so we need something that grounds us, and a part of that is understanding who I am. And that's a life of integrity. So I want you to jot down integrity. And after this think tank, take some time to visit that, to think about it, to wrestle with it. Engage those around you with that. that word. What does it mean to you? I've shared what it means to me. What does it mean to you? How do you internalize that? Second thing I want to talk about is something that has emerged. A life of integrity helps us understand leadership is stewardship. A couple of ways I like to think about that. Stewardship, first of all, means that every day is a gift. Every day. Perhaps you've said that. Perhaps you've heard that. For me, wrestling with my mortality in my 30s, my wife's heard those words from a physician in my 30s where she said, if there's not a major change, he won't live beyond 30. So I've wrestled with my mortality for a number of years, and so it's easy for me, I would say, to say every day, life is a gift. Every day is a gift. I want to flip that a little bit to also say, as leaders, what we understand is that every day is filled with gifts. Every day is filled with gifts. That's where stewardship comes in. We have a finite amount of time and a finite amount of energy in every day. Guess what? No matter how busy you are, the sun will set tonight, Friday will end, and Saturday will begin. No matter how much you have on your plate, no matter how much you're stressed, you may be thinking right now, there may be notifications popping up on your screen while I'm talking. Guess what? Friday will end, and Saturday will begin. The gifts that we have in that finite amount of time in a day, they include our relationships, our conversations, our resources, our teams, our organizations, our mission, all of those things that we have. That's a part of stewardship. What am I going to do with that? How will I embrace those gifts? How will I make choices and decisions around those gifts? The conversations I have, the people I invest in. Fred and I co-wrote the book that Stephanie mentioned earlier, Is Everyone on the Boat? There's a statement in that book that says the most important decision that you'll make every day is how you invest in people. It is the choices you make and how you invest in people. Well, you're one of those people. So it's an investment in yourself. It's also an investment that you steward those relationships, those conversations. You steward your own uniqueness, your own gifts, your own talents, your own experiences. You steward those as treasures, because every day is a gift, yes, but every day is filled with gifts. So integrity, stewardship, revisit that. The third thing, decision making. We say it all the time in InitiativeOne, the thing that separates the best leaders and the best organizations from all the rest. It's how they make decisions and how they solve problems. As it relates to work-life balance, the clearer I am about who I am, the better I have a basis for making decisions. We describe it as a decision frame in our work with leaders and organizations. In strategic decision making, we say you better have a framework that you understand, that you've internalized, and that incorporates the things that are near and dear to your heart, the things that are non-negotiable, the core values, those things that are a part of your integrity, whether we're at the level of individual or we're at the level of an organization, a team. Decision making draws from those big picture questions of why do I exist and where am I going? It hones in on those core values that help us determine not only who am I, but who am I becoming. That's that integrity piece. And so when I think about decision making, it's a way for me also to highlight something that, wow, what a difference it makes when we are proactive rather than reactionary. Let me give you a brief snapshot of my story. There was a time I was in a Home Depot store in Arizona. Home Depot store in Arizona, I was buying some paint. While I was in the paint aisle, I sneezed. When I sneezed, my left eye hemorrhaged. Within 20 seconds, I couldn't see my hand in front of my face. I was completely blind by the time I reached the car in the parking lot. And so when I think about that experience, there is a season of my life that every time my nose tickled, I was afraid to sneeze, right? Every time I felt the sneeze coming on, there was real and tangible and intense fear. I think you understand. Now, over the course of time, I'm not afraid to sneeze today. If I was really good, I could work one up right now just to prove it, but I'm not going to do that. There's a time of transition. Fear is an unbelievably powerful motivator in the short term. But purpose, and I'm going to say more about that in a moment, is a better motivator, a sustainable motivator. Over time, the fear of crisis in my health Transition is one of those lessons that Fred helped me learn early on, is that you better have a vision of a better future. My fear of crisis transitioned to a vision of health. So reactionary life is one that's based on fear. Reactionary decision making, more often than not, is rooted in a fear. It's a fear of failure. It's a fear of a number of things. What's important is, think about your decision making. Is it on purpose? Is it proactive? Is it rooted in who you are? Is it integrity based? Or is it driven by fear? The next word that I'll give to you is expectations. And I'll just quickly say, hey, work-life balance, you're going to have some uncomfortable conversations, right? Everyone has expectations. We don't always talk about them. I'm talking about your team, your company. I'm talking about your spouse. I'm talking about your family. I'm talking about the significant people in your life. The people around you that care a whole lot about you, they have expectations. You have expectations. And when we begin to wrestle with work-life balance, these expectations, one of the most important phrases that we share with leaders is, you have to learn to get comfortable being uncomfortable, and you have to put things on the table. There are conversations as leaders that we have to have that involve discussing expectations. What are your expectations? What are my expectations of myself? That feeds into the decisions we make about work-life balance. Again, I'm not here to tell you how long to work, how much work to do, what's good, bad, when to turn your phone off. I'm here to say, have conversations about it. Because what happens when we don't have conversations, whether it's about work-life balance or other issues or challenges in organizational life, what happens when you don't put things on the table is they stay inside. What happens when they stay inside is it can become a fertile ground for bitterness, resentment. It can feed reactionary decision making. It can give oxygen to your fears. It can take you off track. So the last thing I'll say is the big word that I mentioned earlier. It's purpose. It's purpose. How do we wrestle with the toughest issues in our life, like work-life balance? Now, how do we do that? Purpose. Purpose. It undergirds everything I do. It undergirds the decisions that I make. It undergirds the things that are most important to me. When we're on purpose, there's a peace, there's a joy, and so it becomes much less about how much we work and much more about, is there, as Fred mentioned in his blog, there's a seamlessness to life. So that I'm able to lay my head on the pillow at night and I'm able to say, wow, today's going to be a long day. Today will be a long day. I'll fly back to Tennessee tonight. Guess what? I can almost guarantee you that I'll be tired when I'm walking to the car. I can almost guarantee you that I'll be smiling. Why? Because today's a day of purpose. I work long today. So it's not so much about the hours that we work sometimes as whether or not those hours are on purpose. Are we cherishing those around us? Are we cherishing the opportunities? Are we stewarding the conversations we have? How are we making those decisions? And so based upon a life of purpose. So I'd like to encourage you, if you wrote those down, integrity and stewardship and decision making, expectations and purpose, take some time, connect with people around you, whether it's your team in the workplace today, whether it's someone at home, relationships that you have, someone that you can open up, get real with. And I want you to pick one of those words. And this is a takeaway for today. And I want you to take one healthy step forward in terms of the trajectory of your purposeful life. I want you to take one of those words and what would be the next healthy step that connects with what that word means to you. Before I wrap up, I want to take a moment. I want to go to Stephanie just to see, are there any comments, any questions, anything that we could respond to right now before we move forward?
We don't have any questions right now.
All right. So let me wrap up with a couple of thoughts. When you thought about work-life balance, when you engaged with this think tank, what was your hope? What was your expectation? When you walk away from this think tank, here's a way to look at it. I want you to hold two hands out and think, if this is where I am today, what is the vision? Who is the person that I want to continue to become? Who is the person? When we think in terms of those kinds of choices, those life decisions, we frequently look at it in terms of three ways. Maybe you could picture it as 3 ways to live your life. The first one in the middle is, what does it look like for me to live on purpose? What does it look like for me to make those decisions of yes and no based upon purpose? That fuels a lot of things in our lives. It fuels the way we give and receive feedback. Some of those conversations that I mentioned having, those are tough conversations. Those are uncomfortable conversations. Those are vulnerable conversations. And vulnerability comes out of a life where I know who I am. And I've taken the time to drill down deep in terms of living a life of purpose. That's one way to live life. What we like to talk about is there's a pendulum that can swing. We know as leaders what it feels like to swing to the right, toward that drivenness, that perfectionistic, that run hard, get it done mentality. Oh, that's valuable. We're not here to talk about performance as a bad thing. Tracy and I were having a conversation earlier this week in the presence of leaders. I said we wouldn't be in business long if we're out here trying to teach people how to be slackers. We're all about performance. We're all about results. We're all about certainly getting things done. What we know is that a life of purpose improves your performance. That a life of purpose, knowing who you are, it improves your performance. It gets to increased results. It builds the kinds of healthy relationships that we all need for collaborative efforts and complex problem solving. And so I'm not here to say settle. That's the other side of the pendulum, is why try. So you get into this performance side, which is where we all feel the weight of that right now, I believe. We all feel the weight of that. And then the pendulum can swing with that exhaustion, and we call that the settled side. And so without that clean, clear purpose for decision-making stewardship, we can swing back and forth. Sometimes we say it's like a short-term stay over here, but we want to live here. We want to spend our best time and our best focus in the middle of that with purpose. The way toward purpose is to walk through those words and engage yourself, and certainly we help leaders with that. So take a moment, jot your notes down, write a name beside those notes. When are you going to have the conversation? Who are you going to have the conversation with? And where are you going to go with that?
All right, I have one question, and you've touched on it, but I'll have you respond to this specifically. Is it weak or soft to focus on my well-being?
Wow. Is it weak or soft to focus on my well-being? It's interesting. For so long, we have referred to certain things that leaders do as soft skills. For so long, we've referred and we've made this comparison between soft skills and hard skills. And certainly there's value in that to make a distinction between certain things that leaders do. Is it soft? No. Because who are you when you are leading at your best? Who are you? So think about, for a moment, the leaders that have had the greatest impact in your life. I love to describe leaders in terms of validation, just historically. Think about a leader in your life that saw something in you that you had not yet seen in yourself. I suspect you all think of someone who has seen something. When I think about that person in my life, I remember a moment that could be termed as a soft leadership moment where this person was vulnerable enough to have a conversation with me and express a need that they had that they believed that I could step up and fill. So where I connect the dots on that is when I focus on my own care, one of the things that I have to reckon with is I have limits. One of the things that I have to reckon with is I'm not limitless. It goes back to that idea of a finite amount of time and a finite amount of energy. So if I acknowledge I have limits, that also connects directly with the fact that I need self-care. I don't have endless energy. I don't have endless capabilities. I don't have an infinite amount to bring to situations. I have limits. I have needs. A lot of times our greatest leadership moments are when we acknowledge those, we're vulnerable enough to share, and we begin to let people in. That's what mentoring, that's what development, that's what transformational leadership is all about. This is bigger than me because I'm not big enough on my own. Oh, I'm enough. We love to say that. Guess what? I am enough is a way we say, I am enough not to act and react out of fear. I'm going to be on purpose, and that includes bringing others in for a greater sphere of influence. Stephanie, is that helpful? Anything else you would add?
That's definitely helpful. One additional question to that. Does that make me selfish? And does focusing on me mean that I don't care about my professional responsibilities as much?
Wow, that's something that I actually was writing some notes down this week about that. When I look at my own giftedness, when I celebrate the things that I bring to the table, when I pay attention to the things that are my unique strengths, I wrote the words on a page as I was sharing with a group of leaders. Is that selfish? Is it narcissistic? Is it arrogant? And when I talk about who I am at my best, is that, it can be, but I want to bring it back to here's what makes the difference in whether that's selfish or not. Leadership is about me, but it can never be just about me. The defining point of our leadership is, in fact, at InitiativeOne, when we express our purpose, I preface my purpose, my 2-word purpose statement that we refine at InitiativeOne is encouraging transformation. But I preface my purpose statement like this: I exist to serve others by encouraging transformation. So it's very important for me. I believe when I look at me in the mirror that I believe there's a uniqueness to me. There's a uniqueness that I need to invest in and I need to cultivate. I need to give time and attention to what is best about me. And I believe encouraging transformation is one of those things that's best about me. Is it selfish to talk that way? Is it selfish to speak of myself that way? Oh, it can be, unless I connect it to how will those unique things about me help me to serve something that's bigger than myself, help me to serve others. So I believe that's where we cross the line from selfishness. And sometimes we find it hard to give attention to ourselves, especially when there's so much to do and we're stretched and we're stressed. But the investment comes back here. How will me taking care of myself help me to serve others better and have greater influence? Anything else, Steph?
Yeah, this one's a tough one that I'm going to ask. Can self-care become weaponized? Can it be an excuse for naysayers or poor performers to use? How, as a leader, do we encourage self-care without being taken advantage of?
Oh, I love it. So some of you are watching this and you're saying, wow, he just really made my life rough. Because someone's going to say, well, I'm just taking care of myself. I didn't get it done. Here's the challenge. One of the greatest challenges that we've discussed at InitiativeOne is balancing empathy and accountability, especially over the last couple of years, especially given the things that we've all encountered in the last couple of years. How do you balance empathy and accountability? So the answer is yes, it can be weaponized. We talk about all behaviors that can increase and improve a healthy, trusting culture and environment. Those can be weaponized. It's selfishness when we weaponize things that are intended to help us become better leaders. When we get selfish with things that could and can very well feed a leadership culture that's healthy and strong, and it can put things on the table and engage complexity. Yeah, you can weaponize anything. You can weaponize a compliment. You can weaponize these things. That's going back to how do we have the tough conversations? How do we put those issues on the table? If you put that in the chat and you're concerned about someone weaponizing that, that's one of those tough conversations that needs to be had in a kind and a direct and a respectful manner to say, hey, it feels to me like this is what's happening here. Let's engage. Empathy means I care about you. Accountability means I care about you enough to help you keep your commitments. I care about you enough to help you continue to grow and mature and develop as a leader. I care enough about you to help you develop 100% responsibilities moving forward. I had all the information I needed about my health. I knew what caused the hemorrhages in my eye, but I had to take 100% responsibility to make some changes in my life. I did receive empathy. I also did receive accountability. Anything else? That was a tough one. If they get tougher, we're going to run out of time. I'm going to go ahead and tell you.
That's fair. No more questions, but I do just want to share a couple of pieces of feedback from the audience. One said, "This is amazing, one diabetic to another, but really love your comment on purpose versus fear making decisions. Don't give oxygen to your fears. You can see people everywhere making decisions out of fear. COVID is an easy example of this right now." And then one final comment, "I think it's knowing your values and committing to serving them."
Yeah, the final word I would say is we can't do it alone. That's why we develop healthy cultures. We need help. We need help from each other when it comes to accountability. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to the InitiativeOne Leadership Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to support the podcast, please share it with a friend, family member, or colleague, or leave a rating and review. Also, be sure to subscribe to our podcast so that you can stay up to date for new episodes. And don't forget to sign up for our leadership newsletter for new content along with invites to our live and virtual events. You can go to InitiativeOne.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you on the next episode.